Hello, fellow gamers. My name is Emerald Boa, and I stream Standard Hearthstone on Twitch TV. The link is in the description in case you want to catch me live. In today's video, I want to talk about the tips that I personally use to get Legend every month and to just generally increase my overall win rate. I've got quite a few questions from you on Instagram and elsewhere on social media, telling me how you get to a certain rank and you feel like there's this invisible wall that you just can't seem to break through and advance further. You asked me if I had any advices on how to break this wall and reach Legend, or just break from any rank that you're stuck in. I'm by no means a pro, but I do have some tips that I personally find helpful and I use them, so I'm going to share them with you today, hoping that you too will find them helpful. But before we jump into that, I want to remind you that on Monday the 25th of July, 4 p.m. Central European Summertime, I'll be giving away a standard pre-purchase Murder at Castle Natria bundle with 60 packs, 2 random legendaries, and a card back that's been kindly provided to me by Blizzard. The giveaway will happen on my Twitch channel. The link is in the description, as I said, so make sure to click the follow button there so you don't miss it. Now on to the actual tips. Number 1 is really an obvious one, but I really have to mention this because there are still a lot of people out there who don't actually do this. And that is use a deck tracker. I know this may sound redundant to people who already use deck trackers, but for those of you who don't, please get yourself one. They're really important. They're useful for, you guessed it, tracking your deck, tracking the cards you played, tracking what cards are still left in your deck, but also checking what cards your opponent played. And all of this is very important. Here's why. This knowledge is very important because, let's say you're playing a Death Rattle deck, and you didn't really remember what of your Death Rattles have triggered so far. And now you're considering playing a card that will repeat the Death Rattles that you've played. For example, Zarella the Devout. You can take a look at your deck tracker and see what Death Rattles will trigger if you play her, and so you can decide if this is a good call to play her now or to go for something else instead. Similar stands for, say, Thief Rogue, when you're deciding whether to play a card that repeats cards from other classes that you've played this game. You'll be able to see if playing such a card would bring enough value, or is it better to do something else. And for every class you're playing, there will always be a situation where having a deck tracker will come in handy. You get the idea. There are 2 most popular deck trackers. Okay, maybe there are more, but I'm not sure. I know about these 2. Maybe they're the only ones. Anyway, the 2 most popular deck trackers are Hearthstone Deck Tracker and Firestone. I personally prefer Firestone because it has some additional features like Damage on Mordrish Tracker, or how many spells the multicaster will draw, and so on. Now, I know that many of you are playing on the phone, and as far as I know, there isn't a mobile version of a deck tracker. If I'm wrong, even better, get yourself a mobile deck tracker. But last time I checked, there wasn't one, so the chances are you won't be able to find it. Now, for you, I would advise actually trying to remove every distractions around you when playing on your phone. Since you cannot have the deck tracker, you will have to try and be your own deck tracker. Meaning, try to focus on the game as much as you can and remove distractions around you, like colleagues talking to you, music, and stuff like that. Try to focus on the game and try to follow the cards that you've played, that your opponent played, that you still have in your deck. This should help you. It's not as good as having a deck tracker, but it should definitely help you if that's the only option you have. Okay, moving on to the next tip. This again is a pretty obvious one, but I have to say it because many people don't really understand this. Choose a deck with a positive win rate. By this I mean a deck with 50 or more % win rate. Because if you're playing a deck that's below 50% win rate, more often than not, you're going to lose games. And this is not what we really want when we're trying to climb, right? So choosing a deck wisely is a good place to start. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with playing a deck that you find fun and that you really enjoy that's below 50% win rate if you just want to have fun. But in case your goal is to climb, it is much better to choose something that you still find fun, but also has a better win rate. Now, a good place to check the win rates of decks is a website called HS Replay. The link will be in the description. There you can see how your particular deck performs overall. You can see its win rate, but also you can see how other decks perform, and maybe you will like some of the top performing decks, so choosing those to play on ladder will help a lot with the climb. You can find more info on this website, but it requires a premium subscription, but the free version of it is really enough as a place to start. Another useful website is Vicious Syndicate, where you can find even more information for free. For example, what are the best performing decks in your current league or around your rank? What decks are the most popular or have the highest power spike? But also, which matchups are good and which ones are bad for the deck you play. For example, these green rectangles mean that this matchup is relatively easily winnable, and the red ones mean these are the hardest ones to win against, and so on. The rest is in between. This can also help you see which decks have the least red rectangles and the most green ones, meaning the least bad matchups and the most matchups that are easily winnable. So maybe those decks could be the best choices for climbing. And this brings me to the next tip, and that is know the meta and know your matchup. By knowing the meta, I mean knowing which archetypes are the most popular ones for each class. This is useful because on the mulligan phase of the game, you will see what your opponent's class is, and based on their class, if you know the most popular archetypes, you will be able to pretty accurately guess what archetype they're going to play, so you can mulligan accordingly and so plan your game. Also, if you don't figure out immediately on the mulligan phase, probably you will figure out by the turn 2 or 3 what archetype they're playing based on the cards that they've played in these turns. By knowing the matchup, I mean knowing your opponent's win condition, knowing their gameplay style, and knowing what cards they run in their deck. Now, of course, you can never know 100% of the cards in someone's deck, but if you can recognize the archetype, you should be able to know what their key cards are and what other cards they're most likely to be running. This will also help you plan your gameplay. Knowing your opponent's deck and the cards they run in it is important because, simply put, you know what to expect from them. You know what to play around. For example, if you're playing against Fell Demon Hunter who hasn't played their Jace yet, and you're low on health, chances are they will play Jace next turn and you'll be dead if you don't heal. So probably the best course of action here is to heal. Or another example can be if you're playing against a ping mage who hasn't played their Mordresh yet, and if you follow the game, their Mordresh is ready, you know that for a fact, and you're below 10 HP, maybe a good play would be to try and increase your health there. On the other hand, if your opponent has, say, a board full of minions, but all their damage combined is not enough to kill you, and you know that your opponent doesn't run any direct damage, anything that can kill you from hand, or any minion buffs, you can feel safe and attack their face with all of your minions and set up for lethal next turn, and now they will be the ones who will have to respond to the pressure that you put. But in all of these cases, if you didn't know what your opponent could or could not have in their hand or deck, if you didn't know what to expect from them, you could have chosen the wrong course of action, and this could have cost you a win. I hope this illustrates my point well enough. The essence is Know what reactions you can expect from your opponent so that you can plan your actions accordingly. And no, you should not go to websites and try to learn every deck by heart. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, when you recognize your opponent's archetype, know what their key cards are and know how to play against them. The best way for me to figure this out was to actually try this deck myself a few games. That way I could really know what the deck contains, what cards are in there, what cards are important, and how I want to set up my play. So when I face this deck on ladder next time, I know how to play against them and I know what I shouldn't let them do, and so on. I hope you get the point. Related to this point is the point that you should adjust your expectations according to the matchup. By this I mean that some matchups are almost unwinnable. So if you happen to be facing one of those, and if you lose, don't let it get too much to you, because it was almost known from the beginning who would win this game. Good place to check what matchups are good or better. Again, this Vicious Syndicate table that I already showed you before. So there you can see what you can expect from each matchup for the deck that you're playing. If you're facing something that's hardly winnable, know that you will probably lose. And don't get too frustrated if you, in fact, do lose. Now, I'm not saying give up from the start. By no means. You may get super lucky, they may get super unlucky, you may still win, but if you don't, if you still lose, it was expected. Don't let it get you down, okay? But if you still let it get to you and you do get frustrated, here comes the final tip. Drum roll, please. Take breaks. Seriously. I cannot stress enough how important this is, and here is when and why you should do this. Take breaks when you get tilted or frustrated or annoyed by some particular game outcome, or even a random spell outcome, or anything random in the game, or just anything that frustrates you. Every game has at least some RNG in it, even when it's just about what card you will draw next. Sometimes there is more RNG, and sometimes things happen that are very unlikely to happen and are bad for us. We all know how frustrating this can feel. We all know that feeling when our opponent keeps rolling a huffer after a huffer. We all know the feeling when you get randomly pyroblasted in the face for lethal from a random spell with a bowl full of minions. Did I say bowl? Okay, start over. We all know what it feels like when you get randomly pyroblasted in the face for lethal from a random spell with a board full of minions. We've all been there. We all know what it feels like. We all know how frustrating it can feel. Oftentimes we lose games thanks to this crazy RNG, and still tilted from that, we queue and enter into another game. And let's say at some point we are trying to do something that has a 50-50% chance of giving us the outcome that we want. And if we lose this 50-50, the funny thing is, now this feels so much more frustrating than it would have felt if we didn't have the previous frustrating experience from the previous game. Come on, it's a fair chance. It's 50-50, right? If we didn't have the frustrating experience before, it would be okay. 50-50, fair enough, let's go next. But no, more often than not, people feel even more frustrated when they lose a 50-50 after losing, let's say, an 85% chance. We may win this game, we may lose this game, but in any case, we remain tilted because of it and because of the previous game. We go on to the next game, and what many people do, at least I believe they do it, because I do it all of the time when I get tilted, even in the mulligan phase, I'm like, I don't even care what happens. No matter what I do won't matter. I'm just so unlucky. And then I don't even try to guess my opponent's archetype. I don't even try to mulligan properly. I do mulligan, let's say, I go into the game and still in this mood, tilted from the previous games. I tend to make more misplays. I tend to be less focused because my mind is still on those previous two games. I'm not being myself completely. I'm not being at my best. I'm making more misplays. And this, of course, can cost me and any of you a win. This can really make the difference between a win or a loss. And then if I lose this game thanks to this misplays and not being there entirely, I get even more frustrated. I get even more tilted. And then the vicious cycle starts again and again and again, and it never stops until I rage quit. Okay, I never rage quit, but I know many people do. Because, hey, it's a way of ending the vicious cycle. So my advice here is take a break. I advise 2 minutes if possible, 5 maybe even more better, but 2 should be okay if you don't have the time. Check your phone, check your social media, go make yourself a coffee, go use the bathroom, anything just to distract your thoughts from the frustrating experience. When your mind goes away from the frustrating experience onto something else, it will be much easier for you to come back to the game fresh, or at least fresher than you were if you didn't take this break. It will help you focus better on your next games, and this, of course, can make a lot of differences. I imagine this doesn't sound very convincing, like, oh, I needed you to tell me that I should take a break when I get frustrated, really. Believe me, this one really makes a difference. Trust me on this one. It's so important. Now, I know that many of you are playing the game, maybe at work on a break or in between classes, and you don't have a lot of time to actually take long breaks. In these cases, I would advise trying to avoid playing ranked if your goal is really to climb and you know you don't have the time for that. So try avoid playing ranked, but if you still do, and you get frustrated by something, then at least try reloading the game. Try looking around yourself. Try saying a few words to a colleague or anyone who's around, if there's anyone. Anything very short, just to get your brain elsewhere and then switch back to the game. I believe and I hope this will still help you get a little better and a little readier for the next game. I am convinced that if you do this, you will find yourself making less misplays, being less distracted, and consequently making better moves, which can often make the difference between winning and losing. This was my final tip for today. Please let me know if you think I omitted something important. I shared what personally helps me, but I'm sure there are many great advices out there, and I would love it if you would share your advices with me and with other members of the community down in the comments so we can help each other play better. Thank you so much for watching till the end. You are fabulous. Good luck in Hearthstone.